Entomologist, and I can never remember, and I say this at every meeting, your official title with us, but I think it's
the Forest Health Monitoring Coordinator.
There you go. It's a big bunch of words, right? This comes with every PhD.
I know.
And she's going to be talking about this respectiveness.
All right. Thanks for the introduction. So my name is Kelly Oten. I'm an entomologist through my education and kind of came into forestry a little bit through the back door. But today I'm going to talk about the emerald ash borer, something I've been spending most of my time on for the past 3 years now. Does anyone recognize what movie this screenshot is from?
They Live.
No. I thought you had it for a second there.
Them.
There you go. So this is from the movie Them, which was a movie based on the premise that these huge insects, which got big because of nuclear radiation, were attacking the town. There was actually a slew of them where big bugs came in and started attacking towns. Well, today we're talking about an insect that is not nearly as big as those big bugs, but I would argue that it's causing bigger impacts than those ones in the movies. Instead of damaging a single town, we're seeing widespread ash mortality throughout much of the Midwest, the Northeast, and then now the Southeast as well. This picture, by the way, is taken just over the state line in Virginia, and all of these gray trees right there are dead ash trees. So you can see right there, those are all dead ash trees, as well as on the other side of the river. This is what damage looks like in the urban environment. So there are a lot of ash trees that are street trees. These photos are from Toledo, Ohio, and you can see all these beautiful ash trees making that canopy over the street that a lot of people really enjoy. And then, just a couple of years later, all of those ash trees are dead because the emerald ash borer came in and killed them all. All right, so this is the bug responsible. It's a pretty little thing. I actually have it in a vial here, which I will pass around. It is shiny green metallic, hence the name emerald ash borer. You can see how big it is here. You want to pass that around? You can see it has shiny green wing covers and kind of this metallic bronze head. If you lift up the wing covers, the abdomen itself is this reddish purple color. Very striking insect. Actually. They're not too big. You're probably going to see it in the vial and think, wow, this little thing can cause a lot of damage. But in the world of insects, especially forest insects, it is on the larger side. The damaging stage of the insect is the larval stage. And I'll pass around the larva, what the larva looks like. They're basically very similar to butterflies. They go through 4 stages to reach adulthood. And it's basically the larva, which is the equivalent of the caterpillar stage, that feeds underneath the bark and girdles the tree, killing it in several years. Now, these insects are not native to the U.S. They are native to Asia, especially parts of eastern China, and they came over to the U.S., first found near Detroit, Michigan in 2002. When it was first found, though, it was found because a lot of ash trees were already dying. So they looked into it a little more, did some investigation, and they think that it was there for at least 10 years before they ever even noticed it. Some people think that it was probably first introduced in the 80s. How did it get here? Our best guess is that there was wood packing material, came over in a cargo ship, and that wood packing material contained the insects hiding inside. So how does it spread? It is a beetle. Beetles have wings, so they can spread on their own. Optimistically, they can only spread about 5 miles per year, but it's probably more of the 2 to 3 mile range, more realistically. And a lot of research indicates that when adult beetles emerge, they actually prefer to go shorter distances. So they'll only go that distance if they really have to. The big threat is the human-facilitated movement of this insect in North Carolina. So this is when you have a tree that's infested and someone cuts it down and basically moves that tree to another area with the insect inside. It emerges in the new area and then starts attacking the ash trees in that new area. One of the big offenders is firewood. So if you think about it, someone has a dying ash tree in their backyard and they're not familiar with this problem, they could cut that ash tree down, cut it up into firewood, because what else are you going to do with a dead tree? And then they may go camping in a couple weekends and just load it up in the truck and go. We have seen this insect jump several hundred miles without any signs of the infestation between, so we highly suspect that that's going on. We also suspect that it could move in logs if someone harvests a stand that has ash in it, and they're moving it to a mill, for example. Tree waste transport, the waste from doing some kind of harvest. And then nursery stock is sometimes implicated. I put a question mark there, though, because the literature suggests that, smaller trees could potentially harbor the pest, but they're boring insects that need to, feed on the transportation tissues of the tree. So really, they probably need a tree that's at least 1/4 to 1/2 inch in size, diameter, before they can really attack it. And this picture right here on the right, that shows pieces of firewood with larval galleries from the emerald ash borer underneath. All right, so as Chris said, we did not have emerald ash borer in North Carolina until 2013, when we first found it in Granville County. I know the date well because it was my first day back at work after a week-long vacation in Mexico, and I was very distraught to have to hit the ground running as soon as I came back. But this is what we found. First, we found the D-shaped exit holes. That's a pretty characteristic sign of emerald ash borer infestation. You can see it right there. Then we looked a little closer, we dug under the bark, and then that's when we saw the larval galleries. You can see them on the photo here. And Chris is going to pass around an example of the damage where you can see the D-shaped exit holes on the outside, and then if you flip it over, you can see all the damage that the larvae cause. All right, so this is what our map looked like in 2013 when we first found it. We first found it in Granville County, but then we did a survey trying to find it in additional places nearby, and this is when we found it in Person, Granville, Vance, and Warren, like Chris said earlier. So this was 2013. 2014, we continued to do surveys, but we didn't find anything that year. It moved a little bit within those counties, but it didn't jump into any new counties, and we were kind of cautiously optimistic that maybe it won't spread as quickly in North Carolina because we don't have pure stands of ash like a lot of the Midwest does. So maybe that would slow down the beetle.
Do the adjacent counties, Mecklenburg County, Virginia, have ash borer problems too?
Yes, they do. So we fully expected this region to be the first area to get emerald ash borer because I think it was 6 miles north of our first site was the site that it was positive in Virginia. So we were targeting this area for surveys from the beginning. But we continued to do surveys because we wanted to know, is it moving? So 2014, nothing happened. For our surveys, there's several ways that we do it. One is we can sometimes just drive around and do windshield surveys looking for ash trees that are dying or declining, and then pull over and inspect them. We also have traps. That's what these big purple things are on the right here. They're about 3 feet tall. They have a sticky substance on the outside, and then we hang a lure in them that smells like a declining ash tree, and that attracts the insect. They get stuck in the side, and then we check the trap to see where they are. We also started doing river surveys last year by kayak, which I'm not complaining about at all. But the reason being, remember that photo where I showed all those ash trees right on the side of the river? Green ash is primarily found in lowland areas. So if we target those areas by going along the rivers, these are places, forest land, that we wouldn't be able to assess other ways. And we have found several positive infestations that way as well.
Are they like old, new trees or old trees, or does it matter?
It's a combination. The old trees stand out more simply because we can see their declining crown in the beginning. But yeah, they will attack mature, old, healthy trees and very small saplings as well. And then there was one other project that the Department of Ag was working on, and it was a wasp biosurveillance program, where this wasp in the lower right-hand corner is a foraging wasp that provisions its nests with metallic woodborne beetles, which emerald ash borer is. This is a native wasp, but they found out if they monitored the nests of these wasps, they could see what species of beetles the wasp brought back to the nest, and then basically determine if they bring back emerald ash borer, then emerald ash borers in the area. And this program actually positively identified a new site in North Carolina last year. All right, so all these surveys continued. In 2014, we found nothing, and then 2015, we continued to do these surveys, and we found it in 14 additional counties last year. So this map shows all the areas where we currently know emerald ash borer to exist in the state. Every one of those little red blocks represents at least one, in many cases more than one, actual site where you could find emerald ash borer. And what you'll notice is not only is 14 a big number in 1 year, but it's also scattered across the state. So because it was scattered like that, the state decided to quarantine the entire state for the pest. So all of the region in yellow, which includes all of our state, the eastern part of Tennessee and Virginia, all of that's quarantined. So ash material, the insect itself, and any hardwood firewood cannot move outside of that quarantine zone. So basically it means those items cannot move into South Carolina and Georgia right now. So this is the map showing Durham right there in the middle, and it's basically surrounded. Each one of those red dots are a positive site for emerald ash borer. I think the closest one to the building we're in right now is this one right over here in Orange County. I think it's maybe this one or that one. It's about 9 miles away.
Eno River State Park.
What are the triangles?
The triangles, so the triangles are our current traps. So, our traps. So we set traps this year. We have 40 traps set across the state, and that's where the traps are set for this year. So we may or may not find emerald ash borer in those traps. Those are actually all on Duke Forest. So those will be monitored, and if they turn out positive, then I will update the map online at the website that Chris showed you earlier.
Do you want to put a trap on our significant tree? You know, we have this prize tree.
We can.
Okay.
Let me know where it is, and I can set one for you.
But do know that the traps do attract the beetle.
Oh, then we don't want it.
That's a good point. Yeah,
We want one someplace, but not there.
yeah, about a mile away. All right, so what does the fact that emerald ash borer is now widespread in North Carolina mean, other than the quarantine? Well, one, we're about to lose some forest resources. Ash trees statewide make up about 2% of our state's forest. That's more than 258 million trees, though. So even though 2% doesn't sound like a lot, that's a lot of trees. And this is FIA data, so this does not include street trees and urban trees, because those aren't technically considered forest trees. It is a popular urban tree. This photo on the right is taken from historic Oakwood, and that tree on the right where you see it arching over the street like that is an ash tree. And if you walk through there, you can see many, many ash trees, and they're going to lose a lot of the character that they really prize in that area when those trees go. They provide property value, and it's expensive to remove trees in the urban environment. Loss of an industry is an important timber species. There's a baseball bat there at the bottom. Louisville Slugger makes a lot of baseball bats out of ash. A lot of tool handles, basically anything that needs both resiliency and strength, ash is very valuable for. And then environmentally speaking, it's important as food and cover for many different animal species. Now, this is the general life cycle of emerald ash borer. I'm not going to go over it. Basically, what I want you to get from that is it goes through 4 stages. The larval stage is the damaging stage, like I said before. And we see the adult emerging in late spring or early summer. We're actually just in the initial emergence for emerald ash borer in most of North Carolina. And we expect the peak emergence to be in about 2 weeks. Once they emerge as adults, they feed for 2 to 4 weeks on ash leaves. They mate, and then they lay eggs on the tree bark. Those eggs hatch in about a week to a week and a half, and then bore into the tree and then start feeding underneath the bark. We have 1 generation a year, by the way. So it takes an entire year for it to go from the egg stage through all those stages and then back to laying eggs again. So here you can see the larva actually in the tissues of the tree that it feeds upon. You can see the trail behind it. This is everything that it has fed upon. You can see the trail basically gets wider and wider as the larva grows. All right, so what do we look for? It's hard to see insects when they are living under the bark, believe it or not. So a lot of times we have to look for symptoms on the tree to tell us that the insects are there. One of the biggest things we look for is canopy dieback, or thinning in the canopy. So when you start having specific branches start dying, or when you just generally lose the leaves up in the canopy, that basically the tree is going to look like it's in lesser health, and that tells us that something's going on quite obviously. We might also see epicormic sprouting. This is basically sprouting from the main stem because the tree is stressed. Because it's being girdled, it's sometimes similar to a water stress. So you may see these branches off the main stem like that. And emerald ash borer are yummy if you're a woodpecker. So one of the other things we look for is very heavy woodpecker activity. If you see all that flecking, that's the activity of the woodpecker basically flecking the bark off, trying to get to those larvae to eat them. And sometimes they're successful. Sometimes you'll see activity where the woodpecker actually got in there and there won't be an exit hole and the larva's gone, but they can't do enough to actually control the population of emerald ash borer. In parts of the Midwest where there's huge population explosions of the emerald ash borer, they have seen woodpecker populations explode as well in response. And then another thing you might see is vertical splits in the bark. So when you see vertical splits in the ash bark like that, on this photo you can actually see the larval galleries underneath a little bit. Then that's evidence that there could be larval feeding underneath the bark. Now, signs of infestation, basically signs are what we call the direct evidence that the insect is there. The two big ones are first the D-shaped exit holes, which you already saw on the piece of bark that was passed around, but basically it looks like a capital D. It has one straight edge and then one curved edge. It can be in any orientation. So it isn't always the straight side up and the curved edge at the bottom. It can be turned any which way. That's basically the exit hole that the adult makes as it emerges from the tree. When we see that or any of the other symptoms, we'll usually look under the bark to see if it is emerald ash borer, and then that's when we see the winding larval galleries, which you see here. And you can actually see there's an emergence, a D-shaped exit hole right there in this photo, but they're serpentine and kind of go back and forth like this.
Now you took that bark off so you can see the gallery?
Yeah. Yeah, we have tools to hack into the tree for that. A lot of cases, if the tree is declining in health, it's a lot easier to peel the bark off than from a healthy tree. So just to give you an example, this is the first site in North Carolina where we ever found emerald ash borer, and we saw 3 signs and symptoms. One, the declining canopy. You can see how thin the crown is right there. We saw D-shaped exit holes, and then we saw the larval galleries. And here's another photo. It's a little hard to see in this picture, but this ash tree right here is just riddled with larval galleries. Tons of them all over that tree. And I just like to show this picture because there's a no trespassing sign, but the emerald ash borers kind of ignore that. Here's another picture of a D-shaped exit hole. And then when we peeled off the bark, you can see the larval galleries. And these are actually the larvae right there.
So is this throughout the whole tree, or is this just one?
Yeah, so good question. So generally when they start attacking the tree, we usually see them start attacking the canopy first. So they'll attack the smaller diameter branches, then move to the larger diameter branches. And that's why you start seeing dieback as one of the first signs. It's several years until we see them attacking the main stem of the tree, and usually by then the tree is pretty far gone. So that's why it's important to know the symptoms and not just the signs, because you don't always see the exit holes at eye level. This tree right here we actually cut down. We didn't see any of the exit holes at eye level on the main stem, but in the upper canopy of the tree they were all over. So
What age are these trees?
What?
What age are these trees typically?
They range in age. Yeah, they don't have favorites when it comes to tree sizes. We have certain pests that only attack certain ages and sizes of trees. Emerald ash borer doesn't discriminate. It'll attack anything. So it's called the emerald ash borer, and it attacks all 4 species of ash we have here in North Carolina, green and white being the most common, but we also have Carolina and pumpkin. But about a year and a half ago, a researcher in Ohio noticed white fringe tree dying, and he realized that white fringe tree was also being attacked by emerald ash borer. They're actually in the same family as one another. They're both in the olive family. We have a native white fringe tree here, and it is found to be susceptible to the emerald ash borer. There's also a Chinese variety of white fringe tree which is not susceptible to the emerald ash borer. So just so that you're aware of the second host that has just been basically made known. All right, so what can be done about it? What are our management options? We know it kills trees pretty indiscriminately, but how can we react? There's several things that we can do, and I'll basically go through these one by one. So first, insecticides. Insecticides can be very effective against emerald ash borer. We don't always say that when it comes to invasive insects. Sometimes we just kind of shrug our shoulders and say there's nothing we can do and we have to watch our trees die. So I kind of consider this a lucky story where at least we have insecticides, despite the fact that, yeah, they're expensive and yeah, you have to keep reapplying them, but their options to save trees are there. So if a tree is already infested, a lot of times you can save the tree if at least half of the canopy is still alive. This is a photo showing on the left a tree that was treated, and then on the right those 2 trees were not treated with insecticides. You can also just protect your tree. You don't necessarily have to wait until it gets infested for you to start applying pesticides. In fact, I would recommend that if you have ash trees on your property in Durham right now, that you maybe consider this already. We suggest that, or it's suggested in the literature, that you start protecting your trees when emerald ash borer is 10 to 15 miles away. And if you remember that map I showed you earlier, we have it 9 miles away on one side and 10 miles away on the other side. So Durham's already well within that range.
Will the insecticide harm the bees?
Do what?
Will the insecticide harm the bees?
So that is a good question. So some of the insecticides that are labeled for emerald ash borer use are the imidacloprids, which are the ones of concern. However, ash trees are not pollinated by bees. They're wind pollinated, so if you apply it like you should be applying it, then there will be no harm to the native bees. Now I have this little thing at the bottom, white fringe tree does not fall in that category because it is pollinated. So you cannot use the same pesticides on white fringe trees if you decide to treat your white fringe tree. I'm actually planning to make an insecticide guide for white fringe trees separate from the ash insecticide guide that maybe you picked up at the front when you came in. That insecticide guide, by the way, is also posted on our website. Generally speaking, if you have an ash tree that's 20 inches in diameter or less, you can maybe consider treating it yourself with an imidacloprid soil drench. But once it's 20 inches or greater, we recommend getting a professional to actually do it.
Why is that?
Simply because the chemicals, you need more of them, and one of the chemicals that works best for larger trees is emamectin benzoate, which is a triage, and you actually cannot purchase that and use it unless you're a pesticide applicator. So it's restricted use. The chart is up here right now. Actually, this is the same one on the insecticide guide. All of these options for you none of them are restricted use except for triage, which is emamectin benzoate, which is also one of the most effective ones. So if someone were, really wanting to make sure their trees were protected, and say they were large street trees of high value, I would probably recommend the triage. There's a lot of arborists who are getting the equipment to actually apply these pesticides themselves. So you can hire someone to do that.
How long does an ash tree live?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I can take a stab at it. They're not considered some of our longer-lived hardwood trees. They're not like a white oak that can live up to, what, 300 to 500 years. I think ash trees are more of a pioneer species. They're a little bit more short-lived. I think like a champion tree might top out around 100, 150 years, which isn't shabby, but if you're talking about street trees and trees in a more urban and less natural setting, they might, you might take that down to an effective age of 50 to 80 years. They're not long-lived
So if the
trees.
diameter is about 2 feet, this is a huge, we have this huge tree. It's about 2 feet.
Okay. Well, I mean, your biggest trees aren't always your oldest trees, and your oldest trees aren't always your biggest trees. So, I mean, I don't see ash trees really obtaining a size and age that rivals some of the older trees. I mean, I can't really say. If you want to take an increment borer and figure out how old the tree is, you're welcome to it. But, a 2-foot diameter, 24-inch diameter ash tree is pretty substantial. I think it's about, that's hitting its mature status.
Thank you.
Are there any questions on the pesticides? There's a lot of questions asked and answered in this online publication that Dan Herms from Ohio State put out. So if you want more reading material than the front and the back that our agency put out, I would recommend this too. I think it's somewhere in the ballpark of 18 pages long, but it spells out all your options and you can compare all of those things on that list right there. You can see how they rate actually in university and field trials. So is it worth the money to treat the trees? That's, everyone's going to answer that a little differently. If you want to see what a tree is basically worth in a given year, you can go to the tree benefit calculator. You would put in what kind of tree it is, the size it is, and where you live, and it'll give you an estimate for the overall benefits from that tree. So I just plugged it in for a 12-inch green ash in Apex where I live, and it says it probably provides overall benefits of about $56 every year. So you can use that as an argument to say, well, it'll cost me X number of dollars to apply pesticides, therefore you would consider it worth it. But just something to consider. There's also an Emerald Ash Borer cost calculator through Purdue University where you would actually log on, put the trees that you have in there, and it can actually give you the costs for different pesticide applications and what those, basically you could compare them to one another. So just another resource to make you aware of. All right, other than insecticides, another option is simply removing the trees. We did this when we found an isolated population of emerald ash borer in Wayne County. We cut about 6 acres of ash trees. We had Forest Service chainsaw crews go out there, basically cut down every single tree, and then they were all burned. The reason this was done was because at the time we thought it was an isolated population of emerald ash borer, miles and miles from the nearest known location, so we wanted to basically stop the spread of it in a new area before it got a foothold. In the urban environment, this is also considered, it's a little different take than, say, removing trees in the forest setting or leaving them, because you have other things to consider. You have people walking nearby, so is it a risk or a hazard? You have your own property, is it near your house? Things like that. So here's an example. This is from New York. This is a neighborhood that had ash trees all along the street. And the story with this is that the city did not make the residents aware of their plan to use removal as their preferred option. So the residents basically came home to a street that looked like this, and a lot of people were not very happy. So you can see that lamppost right there. You can kind of see it against the tree right there. So this is in New York, Rochester. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully we don't have streets around here that are just